last unit. So we have started with the fifth and the last unit of AS economics, which is macroeconomic policies. Quick overview of what we did yesterday. What is objective? Objective is the target that you wish to achieve, right? When we talk about macroeconomic objectives, it is basically the country-wide targets that you want to achieve, which includes, these are already mentioned: high economic growth rate, low inflation, low unemployment, stable balance of payments, and stable exchange rate, right? The Right. So we don't have graph for trading blocks, but we have graph for trade barriers. So there is a graph for a tariff. So that's one graph that we could not do. We will do it in the revision classes. And there is one graph for quotas. So we'll do that. We'll do that. Right? So that's what these are two graphs that we'll discuss, right? Okay, great, perfect. Now, what are the five objectives, macroeconomic objectives of a country? So the first one is economic growth rate. The higher the growth rate, the more the GDP, the better. We know that. Then the second one is low inflation. We also talked a lot about why low inflation is important in unit 4, if you remember, right? What is inflation? How is inflation calculated? What causes inflation? And why low rate of inflation is desirable? We talked about all these things. Then low unemployment is also a priority for a country. Then came in stable balance of payment. What is balance of payment? We know it. How transactions are recorded in balance of payment, we discussed that. And what is equilibrium and disequilibrium in balance of payment, and how a country can help solve disequilibrium problems. We have talked about all these things, right? And then obviously we also discussed in detail what exchange rate is, how is that determined, and what is a good exchange rate value, what is a bad exchange rate value, and all these things. Okay. Now, to achieve these objectives, there are three policies which are called macroeconomic policies available to a country to achieve these objectives, right? So the first one is called fiscal policy, then it's called monetary policy, and the third one is called supply side policies, right? Now, what is fiscal policy, students? Okay, now the fiscal policy is basically policy related to government spending and government revenue. What is government revenue? Government revenue is basically the income that government generates from taxes, right? And what is government expenditure? The amount of money that the government is spending on different things like constructing roads, bridges, parks, and all these things. Easy? You got on this? Okay. Now that's what fiscal policy is. Monetary policy is, and how does government set fiscal policy? So I did tell you that every year government decides its budget. Now, budget is not something fixed, but it's a plan, right? Budget is a plan. So in this year, in May, June, I guess, in Pakistan, the budget is presented around June. So in June, the government will decide for the next year. So from June 2022 to June 2023, how much government expects to receive in taxes through all these different sources of taxes like income tax, property tax, sales tax, corporation tax, inheritance tax, and all these things, right? And where the government expects to spend this money, right? In terms of, infrastructure, whether it will be spending on infrastructure, building roads, dams, defense, schools, parks, education, so on, right? So that's what fiscal policy is. Now coming to another very important policy for a country. In fact, we yesterday had very interesting discussion that why countries use same currency. I told you the advantages of that, and some disadvantages as well we discussed, right? Now monetary policy deals with the countries with the country's money supply and interest rates, right? Another thing that you need to know is independently managed by the country's central bank, right? Now think about this. We do know central bank is the supreme authority in country's banking system, right? So the idea is fairly simple, that all these private banks, what are these private banks? Commercial banks, right? We also call them commercial banks, private banks. They are there to make profit, Yeah, right. They are there to make profit, right? So who regulates these commercial banks? The central bank. Who prints the currency of the country? The central bank. Who decides the monetary policy? The central bank, right? So that is what all you need to know. Increase in the money supply is cause of inflation. Yes, that's correct, right? So Zuhan asked the question that if a country's money supply is increasing, that will cause inflation, and the answer is yes. Students, think about it. What is money supply? Money supply is basically, cash, currency. It could also be in terms of loans, by the way. Listen to me very carefully. So money supply not only means the cash or the currency that's available in a country, it also includes the loans, the bank loans. Why? Because think about this. What is money at the end of the day? Money is any commodity with which you can buy products. I repeat myself. What is money? Money is any product, any commodity with which you can buy products. So either you can buy products through cash, or you can also buy products if you have credit. What is credit? I go to bank, I say I need a loan. Let's say there will be a complete process around it, but if let's say the bank approves my loan, then with that amount I can buy a car, I can buy a house. So even that loan is allowing me to buy goods and services. So that's also part of money supply. Purchasing power will increase, so the demand will increase, causing demand inflation. Exactly. So when there's more purchasing, there's more demand for goods. The products are the same. The quantity of the goods available in the market is the same, but there's more demand from consumers. Overall, there will be higher prices, more inflation. Correct. Absolutely. Absolutely. Very nice. Correct. Okay, students, are we clear on this? We good? Can we move on? Okay. Now, monetary policy. We'll come back to this and discuss in more detail that how monetary policy affects the outcome of an economy, right? But for now, what you need to know that monetary policy, first thing, is independently managed by the country's central bank. Be more precise, without any interference from the government. I mean, to tell you this, that even the president of Pakistan or prime minister is more powerful in Pakistan case. So even the prime minister of Pakistan cannot dictate country's central bank what kind of monetary policy to have. I repeat myself. Even the prime minister of Pakistan cannot dictate the central bank of our country that what type of monetary policy to have, because it's completely autonomous. Autonomous meaning independent. Central bank will have its own monetary policy. Easy? Easy? Can you move on? Okay. Now, this being said, then comes in the third and the last type of policy, and we'll discuss this one in detail as well. But let's first understand what supply side policies are. Supply side policies are government government initiatives slash supply side policy are government initiative strategies to enhance country's production potential. Right? So think about this. Now you have to listen to this carefully. Fiscal policy and monetary policy, as we will see in a bit, they are demand side policies. What are they? They are demand side policy. What do we mean when we say demand side policy? Because they affect the aggregate demand, right? So the idea is fiscal and monetary policies are demand side policies as they affect aggregate demand. How so? I'll explain you in a bit. Don't worry. Whereas supply side policy on the opposite affects aggregate supply. So do you guys remember that how is GDP determined, right? So where the aggregate demand and supply are equal, that's where the that's where the GDP of a country is, right? Simply speaking, downward sloping is your aggregate demand, upward sloping is your aggregate supply. Wherever the two are equal, that's where your real output is. That's where your real GDP is, right? And you have general price level on the y-axis. You would remember this, right? Now, what I was saying here is that monetary policy and fiscal policy affect the aggregate demand. I'll tell you how. But on the other hand, supply side policies affect aggregate supply, right? So what's the objective of supply side policy? Supply side policies are government initiatives and strategies, what type we'll discuss, that are used to enhance a country's production potentials, right? Is this making sense, right? Okay, now let's talk about each one of these one by one, but let's first start off with supply side policies, right? Now, think about some some possible initiatives or government initiatives or strategies that it can use to boost the country's supply. So what strategies or initiatives can a country use to boost its aggregate supply? Can you think of a few examples? What strategies and initiatives can a government use to boost its aggregate supply? What do you think? Invest in education. Amazing, amazing. Just give me a second. So following could be some effective supply side policies, right? Okay. Now the first one is investment in human capital, right? Now, why am I writing human capital and not just education? Because human capital includes everything from education to training. You know what training is, right? Because education is only for kids, right? I mean, going to school, universities, I mean, still at a certain level, but training could be for anyone. I mean, even a 40-year, 50-year-old person could be getting retrained or getting some training to develop a skill, right? To become a plumber or to become an electrician or whatever, right? So that's what it is. Investment in human capital. That's the first thing. More training programs, right? Exactly. So what is human capital? Let me first define that for you. Refers to the quality of human resource available in a country, right? Now, what is human resource? Human resource, labor, basically, the workers, the workforce, right? And that is what human capital is. So human capital is directly affected by two things. Human capital, can you guess what are the two things? Quality of education slash training, because as I said, education is just for kids, training could be for anyone, and quality of healthcare. Students, do you agree with me or not? Right? So human capital, which is the quality of labor force available in a country, that is directly affected by two things. How good is the quality of education and training available in that country, and how good is the quality of healthcare? Because if people are educated, trained, and on top of it, if they're healthy and they have good, health, mental health, obviously through education training, and physical through healthcare, right? So these are the two things that will affect the quality of human capital available in the country. Now, what will that do? We are coming towards one. So with more productive labor force, think about this. Now things have changed. Humans don't need to do manual things. So gone are the days when, people had to, manually do tasks in construction or in agriculture or in mining or anything, right? Now you have machines, but to develop those machines, to make businesses, to run businesses, there needs to be efficient labor force available. Do you agree with me? Right? And that's why investing in human capital is so important. Yes, we will come to that, John. That's correct. I'll touch on that. Okay. Now that was the first one. Then another thing that we mentioned, providing subsidies, to uh, important slash strategic industries. Now, what are these strategic industries? Now, think about this. Technically, subsidies are huge financial burden on the government, right? Government can't go around giving subsidies to all sectors, and that is not even recommended, right? Why? Because I mean, if government is paying subsidies, where is the money coming from? Students, where does the money come from? From money. And obviously, if you're spending more on some subsidies, this means that you will be able to spend less on other things. So that's not very much recommended. But there are few important industries in a country which might be in need of subsidies. Let me give you a few examples. So Pakistan is very popular for, let's say, agricultural goods and textiles. So if we give subsidies to these industries, especially the ones that are contributing to our GDP, as we just talked about in previous lectures, then that could really boost our exports. Yes or no? Right? Um, so let's put it down like this: providing subsidies to important sectors which are contributing more the country's GDP slash exports would really it's right. So that's basically what the country is trying to achieve. That providing subsidies, you know what subsidies are, right? Financial payments to producers of certain products. So if government provides subsidies to these industries, then it can expect to boost its economic growth through more GDP, through more exports, and so on. And export economic growth. I wanted right. My bad. Right. Easy. We go to the students. Can you move on? Okay. Then another thing that Zohan mentioned was exactly investment, right? Another thing that's very important and more than investment. Now listen to this very carefully, Zohan. I mean, it's not very simple process that the government will say, okay, let's start investing in the country. No, no. It requires some prerequisites. So for businesses, local and international businesses to invest in your country, there need to be, so there are certain prerequisites that need to be met. Like for instance, there should be stable economic environment, there should be stable political environment, the law and order situation should be good. Do you agree with me? Right? So let's put it down like this: encouraging investment. Or another wording, ensuring conducive environment. Now, what it basically means that that the economy should make more business friendly policies, more investment friendly policies, so that it boosts investment in that country. Now that can include a couple of different things: reducing taxes for new businesses, providing them space. A lot of time government provides them space to settle in an area, right, which is cheaper and it has good infrastructure like roads, electricity, and all these things. Then the government can, do other take other steps, right? Like providing education and training to citizens and so on, making more educated workforce, right? Is everyone clear on this? So ensuring investment conducive environment, right? Through giving businesses tax discounts, right? Uh, Tax holidays is a better word, right? So when you provide tax exemptions, let me write this down. When these are tax exemptions for new businesses, right? Okay. Through giving businesses tax holidays, tax exemptions, right? Establishing students, by the way, if there is anything confusing, anything not clear, you have to ask me, just like it happens in any of my classes, right? Establishing industrial zones. So these are industrial zones that I was talking about. These are areas that are reserved for uh, businesses, uh, production facilities like factories, and they provide access to utilities like uh, electricity, gas at subsidized rates, right? Students, are you getting me? Okay, now what are industrial zones? Industrial zones are these areas reserved for businesses. Most of the times, these are areas reserved for factories, not just offices, but for factories. Sometimes it could be offices, could be mixed, right? So these industrial areas are outside major cities, as you can imagine. And these areas are reserved for businesses, and there they open their factories, offices, and they get access to good infrastructure, good roads, good information, good internet facilities, and all that communication, IT. And then they have subsidized utilities, subsidized electricity, subsidized gas and all these things. And that is also an incentive for businesses to locate there, right? Are you getting me? Right? Simplifying, then, I mean, this would be, let me write this down, simplifying the uh, national trade and transactions process, right? So, I mean, anything that promotes investment, anything that encourages investment, right? By giving businesses incentives. What are their incentives? Like they have to give less tax, they are getting subsidized utilities, they are getting, trained workforce, they have easier process for making international trade or for making international transactions. So these are all the things that will encourage investment in a country. Do you all agree with me, students? Right? Okay. So far we have talked about provision of subsidies, ensuring investment conducive environment, investment in human capital. What else? What else can boost countries, production potential? What are all the things that can boost countries' production potential? Right? So it is basically, you can think about this as when countries PPC curve. What is PPC curve? Production possibility curve. Shifts outwards, right? This is when the country's production possibility curve shifts outwards, because that shows you what? That shows you more productive. That shows you more quantity of resources or more quality of resources. Agreed? Right? Then another thing that's very crucial for economy growth, investment in research and development. Okay, now again, the age and time that we live in, it's about who gets to develop, which country gets to develop a new product much efficiently. I repeat, now in this age and time, we are living in a technology era, and there is a constant, competition between countries to develop a better product at lower cost, and that requires research. No matter what product you think about, whether that be textiles, whether that be whether that be education, whether that be medicines, whether that be aircrafts, automotives, whatever, right? Now if you don't invest in research and development, again, how will you do that? The government has to make an environment that promotes investment in research and development. What can you do? You can do something similar to what I've mentioned over here. Giving incentives for businesses to do research and development, right? You know what patents are? Intellectual property. Have you guys ever heard these terms? Copyrights, you must have heard. Have you heard these terms, or are these all new to you? Right. So think about this. What is a patent? Patent is a license. It is the right. It basically shows that you have produced something, and only you have the right to produce that thing, right? So if you get something patent protected, so let's say I'm Apple develop a new technology in cameras in their cell phone cameras, then, and if they get it patent protected, then it means that no other cell phone company, Samsung or Huawei or whichever, can copy that technology from them, right? So that's what patents are, that's what copyrights are. Similarly, when you buy a cassette, you can't make other copies and then sell it. Technically, it's piracy, right? And that's against intellectual property law. Intellectual property says that whoever came up with the product, digital things basically we talk about, right? So that is your property, right? That's your idea, that's your creation, that's your creativity. So that is what it is. Easy, students? Any confusion? We good on this, right? Okay, then anything else that comes to your mind, how government can encourage, how government can boost aggregate supply, right? So these are some important things that we have talked about here, right? Right? Okay. So we have talked about research and development. We have talked about ensuring investment conducive environment, providing subsidies, investment in human capital, right? And yeah, all these things. Okay, perfect. Now let's come to other two policies, fiscal and monetary policy, right? Now think about this. We'll talk in a little bit detail as to what fiscal policy is, what it includes. So fiscal policy, as I told you, it deals with two things: government spending on different goods and services, and government revenue from the tax money that we pay to the government. Okay. Now the idea here is, students, that there could be two possible scenarios when it comes to fiscal policy. Possible scenarios for fiscal policy, namely expansionary policy, and I'll tell you when a country uses expansionary policy, um, expansionary and contractionary. Now, if any one of you know already, you feel free to contribute. But expansionary, as the word suggests, what do you do in expansionary policy? So in expansionary, you want to basically, when a country wishes to boost its economic activity, right? So when you're trying to boost your economic activity, then you have to do what? You have to lower your taxes. Yes or no? Therefore, it involves lowering taxes, all sorts of taxes. So just imagine what happens if income taxes are reduced. People will have more incomes. With more incomes, they'll buy more goods, which means more economic activity, higher GDP. Do you agree with me? Therefore, it involves lower taxes and higher government spending. So on one hand, government will be increasing its spending on different projects, education, healthcare, and so on. And on the other hand, the government will be reducing its taxes so that people have more incomes and they spend more. Confusion, students? Anything that's not clear? Anything you want to ask me? Right? On the other hand, contractionary policy is quite the opposite. Aims at reducing economic activity. By the way, when would you want to reduce an economic activity? Why would you want to reduce a country's economic activity? Which, can you give me some examples? Which involves increasing taxes and reducing. Okay, let me read your comment. Okay, right. So think about it, students. Sometimes inflation is very high. I did tell you, demand pull inflation. What is demand pull inflation? When aggregate demand is very high, people are buying more goods, but there are not enough goods to be sold in the market, and therefore the prices bid up. So to control that demand pull inflation, the government might want to reduce or shrink economic activity. Yes or no? This is making sense, right? So in that time, yes, exactly. So for that case, you would want to increase your taxes. So when taxes are higher, what happens? People's spending power decreases, right? So they will spend less. They will only spend on important things. They'll start saving more in the fear that in future the taxes might be even higher. And the government is also spending less. So overall aggregate demand is low, right? So that is what controls inflation. So that is contractionary policy. Just like the way just like the way fiscal policy has contractionary option and expansionary option, similarly, monetary policy also has these two possibilities or these two scenarios. Expansionary, what do you do in expansionary monetary policy? You will lower your interest rate. Mean lowering the interest rate. And what will that do? Can anyone of you tell me? Boost borrowing, and so will increase economic activity. Vice versa. Contractionally, students, are you following me or not? When interest rates are low, what happens? People borrow more, invest more, businesses invest more. Overall, there is more economic activity. On the opposite, in contractionary policy, this interest rates will be increased, which will overall suppress economic activity. Right? Again, and when will you use contractionary policy? When you have to reduce inflation, control economic activity. Easy, students, any confusion so far? Anything that's not clear, anything you want to ask me? Yeah. Okay, so students, this will get more clear when, right? So this will become more clear when we will do some past paper practice related to this. Right, people will spend more, causing the spend will increase and invest more. This will lead to more employment opportunities, the purchasing power will increase, plus the GDP will lead. Exactly. In case of expansionary policy, yes. In case of expansionary monetary policy, when government lower its interest rates, then exactly that is what will happen. One, people will borrow more, spend more investment, more employment, and overall higher economic activity. And vice versa, when interest rates are higher, people will borrow less, businesses will borrow less, less economic activity, and lower GDP, right? Okay, so students, will stop here for today, and congratulations. This brings us to the end of our syllabus, right? AS syllabus. And then tomorrow onwards, what we can do is either we can do some recap of some important topics, or we can directly jump to past papers. If you ask me, I will say we jump to past papers, and in the process, if there is any topic that's confusing or difficult, then we can discuss that along the way. What do you think? Right? So whatever you think about it today, I have to go somewhere, right? Kindly drop me a message on the WhatsApp and we'll discuss it there, right? So have a good night, take care, and Allah Hafiz.